We have John Solomon of The Hill, and we're going to talk about the release yesterday of Lisa Page's testimony. Is now this whole 2 years, a culmination of unpeeling an onion is now reaping some benefit, and we see that at the end of the tunnel here, there are going to be indictments, and all names you're going to be familiar with are in deep trouble. Gregg Jarrett, author of the #1 bestseller, The Russian Hoax. Let me ask from a legal standpoint, Greg, you first. Let's talk about the sentencing, but more importantly, I want to talk about what happened immediately thereafter with the Manhattan District Attorney, because Bernie Kerik had a great tweet about this. This is the greatest demonstration yet of a politically motivated, corrupt at-Manhattan DA who pre-announced his intent, then coordinated with Mueller's team to ensure that Manafort dies in prison, because immediately after this he was charged with 16 new charges, not federal, in Manhattan. Can you I'll let you explain it from the legal perspective.
Well, this is redundant. It's overkill. It should be double jeopardy, but the law doesn't favor that, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, they're still going after Paul Manafort with a vengeance, even though two judges have now said in their respective cases involving him that there's no evidence of collusion. That on top of the House, that on top of the Senate. And I suspect that if Robert Mueller, the special counsel, had evidence of collusion, somebody would have been charged by now, but so far it hasn't happened. You got a lot.
But this seems like it was all planned out. Why, the second after he's sentenced?
Oh, sure. Of course it was.
So it's a total of 7 years. How many years would he have to spend in prison?
Well, he'll probably, you get a 15% reduction for good behavior, so that's the knockoff. Not like state courts where you get a lot more for good behavior. So he's probably going to have to do, at least 6.5 years. Yeah,
it's 7.5 years total, so I guess some of this must have been concurrent, correct?
Yeah, I think 37 months is concurrent or somewhere around there. But he's going to have to do some years behind bars. And Dick Blumenthal is wrong. It's not obstruction of justice to exercise your constitutional duty as president to pardon somebody. But every time Blumenthal opens his mouth, he demonstrates his ignorance of the law.
Well, he was also leading the I believe. Haven't heard him say I believe about the Democratic lieutenant governor in Virginia, in the Commonwealth there. Let me get your reaction, John Solomon, to today's, sentencing hearing. The reaction you hear outside of the courtroom is just, it's sort of like the left is triggered. One of the things now that we have two judges conceding there was no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion in these cases, we're expecting any day now the Mueller report's going to be at least handed over to the AG. I don't think we'll know for some time whether part of that or any of that is going to be released. But right. You have pretty good authority, and your sources are telling you pretty confidently that there is no Trump-Russia collusion that was found by Mueller.
Certainly that's what people are telling me, and no one will know for sure until the moment the only guy that matters hits the send button, and that's Bob Mueller, right? And when he hits that send button, he transmits that report to the Justice Department. We'll finally know the answer. But I think in every public setting we have seen in the last couple of years, from the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, to the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, to two judges in the Manafort case, to every other sentencing involving a defendant in the Mueller prosecutions, and in Mueller's own statements and indictments, there has not been a single allegation of collusion between the presidential campaign and Russia. And I think that what we know from the body of evidence is that it didn't exist. And another big important piece of that evidence came out yesterday. As you know, earlier on your show, we broke the stories about what was in Lisa Page's testimony, but the official transcript came out yesterday. And what did Lisa Page tell us? After 9 months of using the most awesome powers that the FBI had, FISA, surveillance, interrogation, monitoring, in May of 2017, they still had no evidence to prove anything of collusion, as Christopher Steele had alleged in his dossier. If all of that investigation couldn't turn it up, and all 2 years of turning and indicting defendants hasn't turned anything up, I think it's highly unlikely. And I think today, when you watch what happens today, the protesters outside, the immediate re-indictment in New York by Cy Vance, a very political prosecutor in Manhattan. You see a lot more politics in the court of law than I think most of us would like to see. These legal cases should stand on their own merit, and yet you see in the form of protests, in the form of a sudden re-indictment timed to the end of the sentencing, a lot of political shenanigans going on in the legal system.
I agree with that completely. I mean, you just sit there, they're just waiting. Just in case you think Donald Trump's going to pardon you, we're going to make sure you die in prison. And that's how I took it with this today. And, yeah, there is overkill at some particular point with all of this. When you go, though, we look back at we now have had 2 weeks of release. Let's just assume for a moment John's sources are right. I've been hearing the same thing. Democrats seem to be telegraphing that they know that there's not going to be what they want in the Mueller report in terms of a pathway to impeaching the president over collusion, because there wasn't any. I expect it'll be sternly written and there'll be innuendo in there because I guess they'll feel compelled to do so to justify their existence, Greg. But beyond that, it's the law that matters. But what is now beginning to build are the things that we wanted for a long time. Yesterday, we got Lisa Page's testimony. Lisa Page basically affirming everything we believe that the Department of Justice, that would be Obama's Justice Department, that would be Attorney General Lynch, were up to their eyeballs in helping to protect and prevent Hillary Clinton from being charged as any other American would have been charged. And even Lisa Page acknowledged all protocols were put aside. We also know Comey and Strzok wrote the exoneration and purposely withdrew those magical words that met the legal standard, gross negligence. They added a new standard called intent that is not part of the law. So the fix was in. Hillary was never going to get indicted, even though even James Baker, the chief counsel under Comey at the FBI, thought she should be indicted.
Absolutely. The couple of things jump out with her testimony. The first one is she said, quote, every person on the team knew no charges would be brought. Fast forward to about 70 pages, and she admits the Department of Justice actually ordered that Clinton not be charged for gross negligence. She was pressed about that. Well, what was the rationale? She said, well, there was some discussion that she didn't have the intent. But as you just pointed out, intent's not required under the gross negligence provision. But she could have been charged under the intent provision because Page, fast forward another 50 pages, admits that intent is not intent to break the law, but the legal standard is intent to commit an act that has the effect of breaking the law. And it's abundantly clear by Clinton's own admission she intended to set up a private server, intended to use it exclusively for all of her emails, including classified documents. That's an intent crime. She should have been charged under both intent and gross negligence, but the fix was in.
Wow. I want to get your take on it. Now, John, I want you to explain the 5 buckets, because the testimony that we're getting, thanks to Doug Collins, a Republican from Georgia, congressman, he gave us last week Orr's testimony. Now he gave us Lisa Page's testimony, and he says he's going to give us all of it. But we have the information you want and I want. 302s, the FISA application. We want the Gang of 8 information, and you can explain what all of this will bring to light.
Yeah, Greg did such a great job, as he always does, in analyzing all the legally significant things that Lisa Page said about the Clinton case. There's one thing that jumped out at me on the Russia case, and that is, the question has always lingered over this: how much did politics play in a role in making the decisions the FBI did? And by her own admission, Lisa Page testifies that they were weighing the fact that they didn't think Donald Trump would win the presidency as one of the weights in how much they should investigate the Russia allegations. And I think that is such an extraordinary admission. I have never, in all my life, covering 32 years of the FBI, ever heard an employee of the FBI claim that the winning or losing of an election was going to affect the tactics or the intent of an investigation. And it explains something that happens the day after, something you and I reported on your show a long time ago. The day after Donald Trump wins, they escalate their efforts by a major proportion, which shows that politics was involved. If this was any other case, he would investigate it because the allegation is serious and the security is at risk. Here, it's not serious if he's going to win, but if he is going to win, it's going to be serious. It shows the raw political nature and that politics did infect decisions, certainly in the Russia investigation. Now, how much did they affect it? I think the big story that's going to come out in 2019 is not the absence of evidence of criminality, because we now have that pretty well established that there wasn't a criminal scheme between the president and Russia to hijack the election. What I think the big story is going to be is the abundance of evidence of innocence that the FBI collected, intercepts or informant contacts with Carter Page and George Papadopoulos that are going to show the FBI not only knew there wasn't evidence of a crime, they had admissions of innocence, and they kept that from the court. Those 5 buckets of documents we're talking about is the key evidence. There are the documents that were turned over to Congress in a briefing in June of 2018 to the Gang of Eight, known as the Gang of Eight documents. They're among the most important documents that could show how bad the FBI acted in this investigation. There is a spreadsheet that shows how many things were wrong in the Steele dossier, and yet they proceeded with it. There are the 302 interviews of Bruce Orr and his contacts with Steele in the Justice Department, his facilitating role. And then there are the original FISA documents. When we get all of those things, we're going to see not only how politics affected it, we're going to see how illegally the FBI withheld evidence from the court that would show the men they were targeting actually were making statements of innocence, and it was not being informed to the court. I think that's going to be the big story of the second half of 2019.
All right, stay right there. We'll take a break. More with John Solomon, Gregg Jarrett. All right, as we continue, Gregg Jarrett, John Solomon. John just went through a litany, Greg, of what is to come. With the time we have left, what does that mean for the names that we have all of us and so many others? I don't want to list everybody's name. I'll forget someone. What does it mean for the people that abused power and were corrupt at the highest levels of the DOJ and the FBI? And now we're learning the Lisa Page testimony shows Loretta Lynch and maybe Obama in some way. What did he know? What was he informed of? And when did he know it? Where is this going to go?
Well, it means trouble with a capital T for those people at the FBI and the Department of Justice who were involved in this cesspool of corruption. And I was glad John Solomon just mentioned his reporting has been so instrumental, but that Lisa Page revealed that it was all a political calculation. She was pressed, what's the insurance policy? She said, well, I don't really remember that, but then she went on to explain that it was a political calculation, that we're going to assume Trump doesn't get elected president, but our insurance policy will be this hoax of collusion. And if he wins, we'll go after him with a vengeance, and that happened.
And, John, your take on that?
Yeah, he's exactly right. It is a hoax, and they know it's a hoax, and they're only going to execute the hoax if Donald Trump wins the presidency. It's extraordinary. And how we're going to know how big a hoax it was, beyond all the great reporting in Gregg's book and about all the things that other people have reported, when we see how much evidence the FBI had that showed what they were pursuing was wrong-headed, that Carter Page...
Well, we know they were warned. All right, I got to let you both go. Great work, all of you. It's been 2 years, and we're getting to the finish line. I can see the landing strip in sight.